a change of consciousness. So we're constantly growing. Our consciousness is changing all the time, but in a more gradual and subtle way, moment by moment, day by day, lifetime after lifetime. And so the description of an initiation is that it's a moment in which you're ready to expand your consciousness. Your consciousness, you're at a point where that can happen safely for you. And so they're given numbers just to indicate a sequence. And a master of wisdom has taken the fifth initiation. So these 63 masters who are associated with Earth's evolution have all taken the fifth initiation. There are many more people who have taken the fifth initiation, but they are not associated with our evolution. After you take the fifth initiation, you can stay here and work to help Earth's evolution, or you can go to other parts of the solar system or beyond the solar system. The teaching in the Ageless Wisdom is that life is everywhere throughout cosmos, and consciousness is everywhere. So we're not alone, and definitely you wouldn't necessarily see people in physical bodies if you went to other planets, but on the subtle planes, there are people living on these other places, and they have consciousness just as we do. And they're also going through a process of evolution just as we are.
I want to point out that the 5 million people at the bottom of the triangle, which actually are not, they are the new group of world servers, was inaugurated by the masters. I don't know when, maybe Rich knows when this came about, but to sort of bring in the new age, I think, in the new age of Aquarius. These are all people who are working in every field of endeavor around the world, but they're very oriented to service. They may not know that they're part of the new group of world servers consciously, but they are participating as, you know, they're here to serve the world. They're working in all the fields, in political fields, in the climate, you know, sciences, in groups of all kinds that are serving humanity around the world. So that's a very large number of people who are oriented to serving their fellow human beings. And it's a project that the masters inaugurated in order to help us achieve this understanding of our relationship to each other on our planet as one human family, and the need to serve our brothers and sisters.
Yeah, the spiritual kingdom, I think you could look at that as the higher center that's above humanity, and that these masters are ones who have elected to remain behind in a particular field of service to specifically help humanity evolve in consciousness. But there are many masters who've preceded them and have gone on to higher spheres of evolution. And if you look at it as a school, these are the teachers for the school for the planet Earth. But there are higher schools that the masters themselves go on to further their development, and it continues on. So it's only a small number of masters, relatively, who remain behind as a sacrifice to help humanity evolve. And so that's what those 63 masters represent, out of hundreds and hundreds of masters who preceded them and gone on to higher spheres and other modes of service in the solar system. For example, all the planets in the solar system have schools, and they're evolving in their own way in higher spheres. So you can see, in a sense, that we're looking at a very small number of people given the whole population of the planet. And so you might infer that we're at the very beginning. Humanity is at the very beginning of this process of becoming masters. And so that's will happen over the next 2,500 years, as Maitreya, as the world teacher, will provide the energies, and the master will provide the spiritual structures for millions of people to become masters over the next 2,500 years. And we're at the very beginning of that process. And so one way you can actually see people getting ready to take the first initiation by the millions, since each one of these initiations represents the mastery by the soul of a certain one of your bodies of manifestation, your physical, emotional, mental bodies, and your personality. If you look at the number of people who are paying attention closely to their physical development through exercise, through diet, these are becoming very conscious issues for people in their own lives, and they don't realize it, but they're actually preparing to take the first initiation by the millions. And so that's what we're looking forward to in the next 2,500 years or so.
And so there's something I'd also like to mention, and that is the will to good, or goodwill. Elisa, when you talked about the new group of world servers, people who work for the betterment of all humanity, or to help their fellow men and women, this quality, the goodwill, I think it's often described as sort of the lowest form of the energy of love, and it is a form of love when you wish good for another. And so when we talk about evolution, the evolution of our consciousness, that's kind of a basic starting point, is that when you begin to have that in your focus, that you wish to do good or to be of good for others, that's you taking your own evolution in hand and beginning to work with that process deliberately and consciously yourself.
Right. Just as was said before already, at one point, essentially this process of expansion of consciousness has to do with the incorporation of, slowly but surely, of more of the world and the more of others into our own sort of consciousness. So we're basically, that's what it represents. When we are expressing service toward another, we're already expressing what we ourselves are experiencing as a relationship to another person. And so that goodwill is a natural extension of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. We've got another question. How can the masters possibly have unconditional love and perfect understanding of everyone without exception? How can that be? Good question. A very good question. How can that be? It's so hard for us to understand ourselves even, or the person we live with. So how can that be?
Well, the masters,
yeah,
the masters have evolved to a level of consciousness and a level of love that it is expanded out to reach everyone. So they are basically the incarnation of love and wisdom. And so it's basically every time they come in contact with a person, they're emanating the energy of love and wisdom all the time. So they don't see one individual from another, they see the soul in each person, and they feel the love that emanates from the soul. So for them, there is no distinction of a physical person from another person. They can only experience them as love itself. So there's no divisions for the masters.
So it's really about the way they perceive. I mean, Benjamin Creme has also said they have group consciousness, not individual consciousness. That is, they don't perceive themselves as I, they perceive themselves as we, and not the royal we, like Queen Victoria, but we as in their identity is that they're part of a group, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's their basic identity.
Absolutely.
And also that they look to the higher level of the planet, which is where the purpose of the whole planet is centered. And so there is a purpose coming from the being who ensouls the whole planet for the evolution of all the different beings on the planet in terms of consciousness. So even the mineral kingdom is evolving, the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom. And so humanity is the midway point between the center where the love of God is known and the will of God is known, and these lower kingdoms, the three lower kingdoms. So everything is interconnected and evolving, and humanity has its role to play in this larger system.
Actually, I wanted to point out, we also have a question that is, when they say when the student is ready, the master appears, does this mean humanity as the student is ready? And I would say yes, of course, it does indicate that we're at a point. And in fact, I think this whole process of the return of the master
into matter and where we see the world of form. And so as a person takes additional initiation, their sense of a responsibility expands. They become more in contact with the spiritual kingdom, and the spiritual kingdom is where this purpose energy flows out into the wider world through a plan that's been created by the masters so that everything on the planet can evolve in consciousness. So there has to be an intelligent plan that's being implemented continuously by the masters. So they're not passive, they're constantly active. The hierarchy is a center of great activity over the whole planet, as it's not only because love and the goodwill is an energy, and it's permeating the whole planet continuously. And what it's encountering as resistance to change. So back to the Piscean age and Aquarian age, the Piscean age has certain structures now which have been formed, but there's no new energy being poured into these structures. And so they're basically like concrete. They're like rock, and they're not changing, and they're in people's consciousness, they're in people's minds who are still resonating to the old Piscean age ideals. Meanwhile, there's new energies pouring in that want to change these. And so this, in a sense, a conflict between the energy of change to the new ideals and the resistance to holding on to the old ideals is creating this conflict that we're seeing in the world today.
Right.
And I'd just like to mention, when you use the word hierarchy, you were referring to the group of masters, the masters of wisdom. The word hierarchy is used sometimes as well to talk about them, simply because they themselves are at different stages of evolution from each other, and they work together as a hierarchy, meaning that whoever has greater consciousness also has greater responsibility, and so they share the work in that way. It's very common sense, in fact.
Yes.
But people do sometimes take that word to mean somebody imposing their will on someone else, and that's the farthest from the truth that it can be, simply because the masters of wisdom never impose on anyone, not on each other, not on us, because they know that that doesn't work. And we're still doing it to each other, but we're in the process of learning.
Yes. Well, the hierarchy, in a sense, is like an organizational chart. There are different masters who are coming in on different types of energies, and they have different roles and different responsibilities in this execution of the plan. So the being who ensouls the planet and reaching down to humanity and the lower kingdoms.
So there's a question, again, from the same person who asked about how can the masters possibly have unconditional love and perfect understanding of everyone. The person has also asked, sort of as an extension of that question, so is it true that when a master looks at an individual, they can see, for example, 1,000 plus years span of a person's lifetimes, including the future, rather than just the present life and collection of experiences? I would say probably yes, they can. Elisa or Rich?
Well, I think that introducing the idea of cause and effect and karma is an important aspect, because it's not just reincarnation as a mechanical process. It's a way for the soul to gain more experience through the feedback system of whatever you experience in life. Then that gets incorporated into your soul, and your evolutionary process is a function of this cause and effect process that we call the law of karma.
I think what I also remember having been said by Benjamin Creme is that when the masters look to us, they see our light, and our light is an expression of where we are in terms of our journey, in terms of our own evolutionary capacity, and so they don't necessarily need to know the details. They can see the results of these lives that we've had. I mean, if they need to find for some reason to help a person along, they probably do have the capacity, of course, to see it if necessary. But they, as I understand it, they blow on the spark. They send some kind of energy to help us in this process of evolving, and also potentially, that our solar self is guiding this process. But they see the light in us, and how bright it is, depending on our own place on the evolutionary journey.
Right, how much we're emanating that light of the soul, right? And so I think in terms of what they see, I would agree with you, Elisa, that they won't expend energy to try to see details unless it's necessary. because it's, in fact, that they're just seeing where you're at, actually, your stage in,
Right.
in evolution.
Right.
And what I'd like to do, there's just one more question here that we can briefly look at. When a master looks at a book, is it true that they see something like a painting that sums the book up, including quality, level, etc.? I'm assuming the questioner is asking more or less, can they look at a book and just grasp the contents of the book, sort of in one synthetic whole? That I honestly don't know.
Well, what is a book? But it's a bunch of thoughts, and the masters are working on the mental plane. And so when they see something that is what we would call a book, they can be looking at it as a dimensionless point of information on the mental plane. So they can absorb that instantaneously if they need to. And if they need to know something, they have access of anywhere in the world. They can go to look something up if they need to know something. And in terms of individuals, the masters are proactive in the world. They're constantly scanning the world for looking for people who can help execute the plan in some way. And so when they find these people, they will give them energy to help them along their line. That new group of world servers acts as an intermediary between the hierarchy and humanity. And so ideas go out into the world through the media, through books, whatever type of media, and those ideas then find a resonance with a particular person, and that's how that person then becomes more interested in that particular subject and will take them and help them to grow in that fashion. So this is a very dynamic process of the masters working with humanity. They're not just sitting waiting for somebody to show up. They're actually looking for humanity, to people who can help the hierarchy in some way. And usually they are mentally oriented people, because the masters are working on the mental plane. So that's what they're looking for: people of goodwill, people who want to help humanity, but also people who are intelligent enough to understand the plan that they're trying to execute and how they might fit into it.
So Rich, there's a question that kind of ties into this. Chris Varma has asked, how do we hear the master speak? For example, let's say somebody, a person such as you're describing, a master contacts them or somehow stimulates them. Would this be in a direct way or an indirect way, or would it be somehow that the master would make certain a field of opportunity all open for that person, or how would that work? Do you know?
Yeah, I think all of that. One thing that probably is a common experience to people is they might have walked into a bookstore and a book falls on their head. Or they will just find something laying out, somewhere. So there are disciples who are out of incarnation, whose job it is to go around and help people find information about things, So just because you're not in a physical body, you can still be helping, even if you're not in a master. So this is a process. A lot of people have been guided just by information being presented to them in some physical form, and that will get them going in a particular direction.
Right. Okay. And so I'm just seeing some more questions coming in. Do the masters work with the angels? Do we want to, can someone define what's an angel? Like, for example, the Archangel Gabriel. Or,
yes. The way esotericism uses the term angel is a parallel evolution to humanity called the Deva evolution, and it works with the creation of forms. So everything around us that we see as forms is a creation of essentially a being who is an angel, working through their essentially what are called elementals. And so everything that we see around us is basically a creation of a being who's an angel, responsible for a certain type of manifestation, and works through these elementals to do the details of how that works out.
So what is, Rich, sorry to interrupt, but can you describe what an elemental is?
Well, let's say that you have a plant and you have a sunflower. Well, there's a being, an angel, who is responsible for all the sunflowers as a species on the planet. But if you have an individual sunflower, there's a tiny life who's responsible for the life of that particular sunflower. So you can think about it as that's the elemental, but there's a deva who's responsible for all the sunflowers as a species, and also all the species of whatever animals, vegetables, or minerals. There's manifestations of this creative force that we would call the devas.
And so is the
The,
word deva interchangeable with angel?
yeah,
Yes.
deva in Sanskrit means the shining one, and that's the esoteric term that's been adopted to use the Western term angel.
It's considered in the esoteric tradition as a parallel track of evolution. The Deva kingdom is parallel to the human kingdom, and the Devic elementals or the Devic kingdom learns through the building of form, and the human kingdom learns through the destruction of form. So we're kind of like going at different. We support each other to some extent. So it's the Devic kingdom makes up everything that we see in the material world and the immaterial world too. So it's the form that they themselves created for us.
So Elisa, just a minute, you said the human kingdom learns through the destruction of form. Could you clarify a little bit about that? You're not talking about that we should go around blowing things
No,
up.
but we actually, some of our greatest lessons in life all come from loss, for example, what we perceive as loss. So somebody we love close to us dies, we see their body destroyed, it's finished, their life is finished, and that's really hard for most of us, but it's a learning experience, because in fact it's really an illusion. There's really no separation between us in a physical body and the person who's not in a physical body, other than our own senses can't perceive them anymore. But in fact, it's a great illusion what we're living through. And as human beings, we have to learn to let go of that illusion. And that requires a certain level of destruction, that in our own minds, at least, to understand that it's not what we think it is, it's not what we see it to be. And so that's a huge learning process for humanity.
So in a way, we could say that when you use the word destruction there, maybe another way to talk about that would be that it's a process of detachment from
Yes,
identification with form.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's we learn through the process of that detachment, of recognizing that it isn't the reality we think it is, and it causes us so much suffering all the time. And I read this in an Alice Bailey book, and it made so much sense to me when I came upon that understanding, that the elementals are learning this process. They're learning the process of evolution, the process of becoming who they really are through this process they're kind of on the other arc. We're going in this direction, and they're learning through the creation of form what it means to be alive. So it's just interesting.
So your body is a creation of an angel.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And all the little lives that are a part of your body, physical science tells us that we have billions of individual cells that make up all different aspects of our body. Some of them are part of our DNA, and some are just visiting for processes, but we're all in it together. So we are evolving through our bodies. Which is another way of raising their vibration and helping them evolve. So the more wisdom that you can use to guide your body's development, and your mental body, your emotional body, and your physical body, you are helping evolve those beings too. So it's all part of the evolutionary process that we're all involved in.
So I realize we're coming up to the time when we're going to do the transmission meditation together. So I'll just ask a few more questions that I see have popped up in the chat. So someone asked, do the masters decide our karmic consequences, the karmic consequences that we'll have in our new life or the next life? Would either of you like to answer that?
Well, there's a part of the being who ensouls this planet that has responsibility for the karma of the various kingdoms in nature, as a group, and then as all the way down to individuals. So there are certain beings who guide the development of the karmic process for us. So those lords of karma operate at all levels in the whole solar system. There's karma on individual planets, there's karma in the human kingdom. So it's an integral part of the entire system of reality is this karma. But they're all grades of intelligent beings who operate at different levels of karma. Yes.
And so essentially the consequences of our actions, whether they're physical actions or our speech or our thought, we live the consequences of those actions, whether in this lifetime or another one. On some level, it's a very automatic process. It's almost like a law of physics, action and reaction. But as you say, the lords of karma are involved in making judgments or deciding how that plays out for each of us. And I see here, there's another question about angels. Could you say that angels ride and control people like their horses until they manage to let the soul take charge? I think that's probably that's a misunderstanding, right?
Well, I think that goes back to what Rich was talking about in terms
Yeah.
of our physical bodies, because
Mhm.
these angelic beings make up every aspect of the form, including our mental body and including our emotional body.
Mhm.
And the whole process of evolution and taking these 5 great expansions of consciousness or initiations are all about our having reached a point by which the soul, our soul, is now actually kind of in control of, if you want to call it that, of the elementals or the angels that make up our physical body. That's when we take the first initiation. We have to have reached that stage before the first initiation, this expansion of consciousness, can be taken. And so essentially you could say that this whole process of evolution is our taking back control to some, or the soul is taking back control, or not imposing itself, but actually it's at a point where it's in charge of the whole process. And the elementals or the angels that make up any of these layers of our being, of our personalities, are sort of subject to that, to being yoked in a way by the soul. So I think that that's really what's meant by the question. Maybe
Okay,
Rich has
I
something
didn't
else to
understand
add.
it.
Rich,
Yeah.
you have something
Yeah, you're
to add?
looking for there is a perfection, a goal. Everything is goal oriented. And so there's a perfection of your physical, the control of your physical body. There's a perfection of the emotional body and the mental body. And so through the evolutionary process, we are perfecting those bodies, which are beings who are then evolving toward perfection for themselves. So when you're talking about this process of destruction, it's destroying the attachment to those particular associations, essentially. But in the process of living, you will help drive the evolution of all these various bodies just by living your life, and then trying to understand what is the purpose of life, what are the rules. That's where the teachers come in. Maitreya is teaching the laws of life. And so by learning the laws of life and trying to live these precepts, then you've done the best you can to help evolve all the different structures of which we are all a part. So that's where wisdom comes in, how to make right decisions about living our lives.
I think this is a good moment to talk about who Maitreya is, since we haven't specifically talked about him. And there's just another question that came in a while ago that's very similar to an earlier question, asking how can Maitreya and the masters have full awareness of billions of places and things taking place in our world at the same time? And the answer that was given earlier is that they can do that because of their consciousness, because of how their consciousness works, how expanded it is. So that, for example, something that we do very easily without thinking about it, you open your eyes and you see whatever's in front of you in the same way they see or perceive at that level, because that's the kind of consciousness that they have, group consciousness, and much expanded from ours.
Yes, well, there's a process going on that is called invocation and evocation. So they go where their consciousness is directed by the invocation of humanity, individually or collectively, and then that evokes a response. So without us asking for help, in a sense, or seeking to invoke the help, then their consciousness is not directed toward us. So that is a process that you have to realize we're all involved in. And so one thing that begins to happen as people mature, they realize that there is a higher aspect of life, no matter by what name they call it, that they can appeal to for help. And so that process of invocation is a universal process that's going on continuously. So the masters are responding to that request for help, evoking their help and their energies. And this is a dynamic process going on continuously on the planet.
So there's one last question before we start talking more, just go over a little brief summary of who Maitreya is. Chris Varma asked, can we offer the masters food since they are working overtime for the planet?
Well, their energy comes from the sun. They don't need to eat. They don't need to sleep.
And they work 24 hours a day, right?
They work 24 hours a day.
That's right. Okay, I'm just going to briefly do this so that we lead into the meditation. Now, the Christ is also the name that we give to Maitreya, who is one of the masters of wisdom. And he has, in fact, returned in the sense that he's living physically among us now. But he decided, or he told, he gave out these conditions that needed to be met before he could publicly announce himself and be part of our lives openly. A measure of peace should be restored. We're still working on that. The principle of sharing should be controlling economic affairs. We're not there yet. That the energy of goodwill should be manifesting and leading to the implementation of right human relationships. Now, right human relationships, we haven't said much about that, but I think it's quite common sense. Right human relationships means simply that you treat each other as you wish to be treated, that you treat each other right. I mean, it's very basic. And then the last condition was that political and religious organizations should release their followers from authoritarian supervision over their beliefs and thinking. In other words, people should be free to make up their own minds, and they shouldn't feel that they have to follow what somebody else is telling them. And that's a very important point, because you can't really perceive things the way they are until you're free to make up your own mind. Until then, you're really being, in a way, controlled mentally by somebody else or some other idea. Do either of you want to say anything more about that?
Well, the masters work not by imposing their ideals on humanity, but rather by creating circumstances, or in our world today, crises of various types that evoke from humanity the desire for peace or the desire for sharing. So that as teachers, they're creating the circumstances for humanity to then make a free choice about which direction they want to go. And so we're seeing that on a world scale today, because everybody's in communications with everybody else. And so this situation of the world and various aspects of the situation, whether it's the climate situation or whether it's human rights, it's all set up so humanity makes a decision about which way to go. And so there is this idea that Maitreya talks about, this sort of cleavage. So his energy is creating this split in consciousness between the people who want to go forward and implement these new ideals, and they feel it in their heart that this is what they do, and the other people say we're not interested. So that's what we're seeing today in the world. It's the sort of cleavage between the people that want the new ideals and the people that are not interested in going there.
And to talk about who the Christ or Maitreya is, this is just a very brief summary. He's going to be living openly with us for the next 2,250 years. And he's here as a teacher. He's not here to found a new religion. He says, if you're happy in your own religious practice, continue. He doesn't want to attract followers. He doesn't want people to follow him. What he wants is to awaken our awareness. He teaches the art of self-realization. And so it's a very different relationship, perhaps, than what we're accustomed to, because we're coming out of a period of time in which everyone focused on a leader. The Piscean age was really built around that way of working. in which you'd have a mass of people and they would all be focused on one person who would be their leader. Maitreya is not like that. It's about each of us being aware and paying attention to the master within our own soul. And he's here to stimulate us, to guide us, to help us, but not to lead us. That's not the idea. But he's here for everyone, whether you're religious or not religious, because he's not a religious person. He's not a religious teacher. And his priorities for us are very, very basic and similar to the Declaration of Human Rights: food, water, housing, healthcare, education, and repair of the environment. Extremely important, as we know, for all of us to continue living. We need to have a healthy environment. So his work is really to help us get on track, and he's here to do that. He says, in addition, in one of the messages that he dictated to Benjamin Creme, "I know that within men sits a divine being whose plan it is that love and justice should triumph. This being so, the end is assured." And so he has communicated very directly through Benjamin Creme by transmitting messages telepathically to him. They are published in a book called Messages of Maitreya, what he sees and who he says we are, this divine being, as we've been talking about, the soul, and that our plan, not just the plan of the masters, but our plan is that love and justice should triumph. All of us on some level are here because that's what we want. And so he says that the end is assured, that we're not going to blow ourselves up. And I think that's extremely heartening. And Elisa, I just wanted to mention, you do a podcast, right? On a regular basis, where you talk to people who have had experiences of meeting a master of wisdom. Would you like to briefly just share about that? And we'll put that in the chat, links, so that people can listen to that if they'd like to.
Yes, thank you. I want to apologize. My light has been flickering, and so I had to turn it off. So it's nighttime here in Germany. It's actually it's 9 o'clock. So the sun is starting to set, earlier. Yes, my podcast is called Mystic Takeaway. And generally every 2 weeks or so, I put out a new episode. They're usually about 30 minutes long. And I've interviewed people all over the world about their experiences of being saved from car accidents, or having met someone who very clearly knew something about them. And there's so many amazing, inspiring stories that go back for decades. People share stories that of even when they were children and something happened to them. So it's very inspiring, and it helps us to see that actually the masters are doing their work in the world. They're affecting many of us without maybe our being aware of it. So it's available on any platform for podcasting: Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, Google. So it's called Mystic Takeaway, and I hope you enjoy it. Look it up and enjoy it, and share it with others.
Mystic Takeaway. And we have one last question. Chris Varma asked, has Maitreya been seen recently? And he also wants to know about the connection with Maitreya with Sai Baba. Is Maitreya working with Sai Baba?
I think, as far as I know, yes. I mean, the Sai Baba is considered to be the cosmic Christ, and Maitreya is considered to be the planetary Christ, and so they're working together. Of course, they are working together. I don't know how consciously and how much they do, but it's somebody asked once why Sai Baba doesn't talk about Maitreya, but it was explained by Benjamin Creme that that's not his role in this particular, his incarnation on our planet, the second of 3 incarnations as an avatar, helping our planet as Satya Sai Baba in Puttaparthi, India. His job was something else. It was actually to encourage, I think his actual purpose was to awaken the love principle, as the Christ is, that's the role of the Christ in the millions and millions of people who were following him, and also help them achieve, get to the point of the first initiation. That's another thing I've heard that was one of his roles. But he has talked about Jesus, but he didn't talk specifically about Maitreya. So, anyway, I absolutely think they are working very closely together.
Well, let's move on and show you the links if you're interested. Share-international.org. A lot of information on that website. You can watch videos of Benjamin Creme talking on Share International's channel on YouTube, and you can buy books or download the free books at share-ecart.com. These are all in the chat as well. And we'd just like to mention these are the free books. There's 4 of them. And you can start reading them right away, available for download. And we also want to mention the magazine Share International, which is published 10 times a year. No advertising. It's paid for entirely by people who subscribe. And it combines information about the Masters of Wisdom, the spiritual hierarchy, the Ageless Wisdom teachings, with current events in the world, projects that are being carried out by people to improve life for everybody. And so there's a really interesting blend between the spiritual and the practical. And that's very much what the Masters are about as well. It's very practical. As you could see from Maitreya's priorities, food, water, shelter, education, it's all very down to earth to make lives better in a very fundamental way. You can find this magazine at share-ecart.com. Also on the website we had up earlier. You can read excerpts from it on that website for free. You don't have to subscribe. And I think we'll go directly now to transmission meditation. This is a group meditation. We do it at the end of every program. 3 people or more can do this meditation together because it's a group meditation. You can't do it by yourself. You don't have to believe in anything to do this. You can just try it out. It doesn't interfere with other spiritual traditions. It enhances them, in fact. So you don't have to choose one or the other. It's a very powerful meditation. And it's basically, the technique is very simple. We say the great invocation together aloud, which is a great mantra. And once we've said that, we sit and focus on the ajna center, the spot between the eyebrows. And that's basically the whole technique. It's not more complicated than that. The great invocation is used around the world in many languages. It's used to begin transmission, but you can also use it on its own as a prayer. And this meditation is a service meditation. When we do transmission meditation, we're helping the Masters of Wisdom in one of the types of work that they do, which is to bring in energies that stream onto our planet from outside the solar system, also from within the solar system, but energies that have a very high vibratory rate and which we regular people can't absorb because we're not functioning on that level. So normally we couldn't benefit from these energies. But when we do transmission meditation, because we sit and focus on the Ajna Center together in a group, and because we use the great invocation to start that process, we create, in fact, a channel through which those energies can flow, and the Masters send those energies through our chakras. In the process, the energies themselves are stepped down or transformed into lower frequencies, and then they pass through us and out and can be absorbed by people. We don't send the energies anywhere. The Masters do that, but we simply serve as channels through which these energies flow. In the process, we benefit as well. Benjamin Creme has said that if you do consistent transmission meditation, for example, a number of times a week, then in 1 year, you will receive a benefit from this that would be equivalent to what would happen if you were meditating by yourself for 10 years, for example. So there's a real increase in potency by meditating in a group and by working with the Masters. Would either of you like to say anything more about this?
I think the only thing I would add is that it can be very stimulating. And so anybody who has a problem, either a heart problem or issue with mental instability, that it might be too strong, too powerful. The energies are very potent. So that's what this slide is about. That's good.
Right. And also, you can't do it if you are below the age of 12, simply because your chakras haven't stabilized enough to take the strong energies. And so it's not that you would be damaged if you did it. It's just that would impose on the masters an additional task. They'd have to protect you because you're not able to take the energies just as they come in. So therefore, under the age of 12, it's not recommended to do it. And we also want to mention that normally people do this meditation in person. They meet together in a bookstore, in a library, someone's house. But because of the pandemic, these days people are meeting virtually, very often on Zoom or other platforms. And so John will put into the chat links so that if you're interested, if you like the meditation, you can continue doing it. Join the groups that are meeting on Zoom. You can also create your own group. It's very, very simple to do. You can read about it in the book on transmission, which is available for free download. You can also read up on transmission if you go to the website share-international.org. And I think that basically we're ready to start. So here's the great invocation. Would either of you like to be the one to say it? We'll mute out those of us who, so we'll just hear one voice of one person saying it, but everybody join, please, and say the great invocation together. We'll all say it aloud. And then after that, just focus your attention on the ajna center. It's the spot between your eyebrows. If you haven't done it before, you can just put your finger there to feel that spot so you know what it feels like. And after we've said the great invocation, you focus your attention there. If you notice your attention wanders, which it will generally for most people, then you use the mantra Om mentally only, not with your voice, and that will bring your attention back. You just say Om mentally and it'll come back to that spot. And that's what we do. We just sit and let the energies flow. We'll meditate for about half an hour. Please join us. We hope you like it. Who would like to say the great invocation? Elisa or Rich?
Sure. I'll say the great invocation.
All right, great. And we'll be back. If you don't stay for the whole meditation, I'd just like to say thanks for coming today. And we'll be back in a month, the second Saturday in September with another program. And I think we'll do another, not in the next show, but I think down the road, we'll do another session like this of questions and answers, because it's always very enriching. And I think that it's something we should plan on. So you can expect to see us doing this again. All right, Elisa, please go ahead.
The great invocation. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth.
That's 30 minutes.
Thank you, John. And that was transmission meditation. And we hope you enjoyed it. As I said before, we'll be back in a month, the second Saturday of September. If this information resonates for you, please share it widely. You can also listen to Elisa's podcast, Mystic Takeaway. And we'd like to thank our tech crew, John in Montgomery, Alabama, and Cielito in Seattle, Washington. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Elisa, for being here today. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. It was a real pleasure. And thank you for all those great questions. Keep them coming. We'll be back with another show, questions and answers, definitely down the road. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.